I said no to the millionaire. My name is Elena. I grew up with very little money, but my parents taught me to be proud. When my wealthy boyfriend proposed to me, it should have been a fairy tale. Instead, I walked away because the price of his ring was my dignity. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between a comfortable life and your own self-respect? It's a choice that sounds easy in movies, but in real life, it's heavy. It's painful. Today, I want to share my story with you. Not just to help you practice your English, but to remind you that who you are and where you come from is more valuable than any diamond. Let's begin. I remember the smell of my childhood home so clearly. It smelled like toasted bread, old books, and the cheap lavender soap my mother used. We lived in a small apartment on the edge of the city. The wallpaper was peeling at the corners, and the heater made a loud clicking sound every winter night. My father worked at a local garage, his fingernails always stained with oil. My mother worked long shifts at a grocery store. We were poor by most standards, but I never felt empty. Our small kitchen table was always full of laughter and loud stories. Then, I met Julian. Julian was like a character from a different world. He was polished. He wore suits that didn't have a single wrinkle, and he drove a car that cost more than my parents' entire apartment. We met at a gallery opening where I was serving drinks as a part-time waitress. He looked at me, not as a servant, but with a gaze that made me feel like the most interesting person in the room. For the first 6 months, our relationship felt like a dream. He took me to restaurants where the menus didn't have prices. He bought me silk dresses that felt like cool water against my skin. "You belong in this world, Elena," he would whisper, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "You have a natural grace that people spend years trying to learn." I was flattered. I was 24, and for the first time in my life, I didn't have to worry about the bus fare or the electric bill. I felt like I was finally escaping the struggle of my past. Julian was my ticket to a life of ease. But there was a small, quiet feeling in the back of my mind. Whenever Julian talked about my life, he called it your old life. Whenever he saw my worn-out shoes, he would buy me new ones immediately and throw the old ones away without asking. I thought he was being generous. I didn't realize yet that he wasn't trying to help me. He was trying to erase me. As the months passed, the fairy tale started to show small, ugly cracks. It wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow, cold drip. It started with the way Julian spoke about my parents. I invited him to Sunday lunch at our apartment. My mother had spent all morning making her signature lasagna. The kitchen was hot and she was sweating, but she had a huge smile on her face. My father had put on his only dress shirt, the one with the frayed collar. Julian sat at our small table like he was afraid to touch anything. He barely ate. He kept looking at his watch. On the drive home, the silence in his expensive car felt heavy. Finally, he spoke. "Elena, they are sweet people, really. But don't you think it's time they moved out of that neighborhood? It's a bit depressing, isn't it?" "It's my home, Julian," I said softly. "No," he replied, gripping the steering wheel. "It's a place you survived. You're with me now. You need to look forward, not back." A few weeks later, we were at a charity gala. I was wearing a dress Julian had chosen for me. I felt like a doll. One of his business partners, a man with a loud laugh and a cold heart, asked me where my family spent their summers. Before I could answer that we usually stayed home and went to the local park, Julian stepped in. "Eleanor's family is very private," he said with a tight smile. "They spend most of their time traveling in the countryside, very low-key." He lied. He was ashamed of the truth. He was ashamed of the oil under my father's fingernails and the grocery bags my mother carried every day. I felt a sharp sting in my chest, a mixture of embarrassment and anger. I realized that in Julian's world, I was only acceptable if I came with a fake history. The night of the proposal was supposed to be the best night of my life. Julian took me to a rooftop restaurant that overlooked the entire city. The lights below looked like spilled jewels. The air was cool, and a violinist played softly in the corner. Julian looked more handsome than ever. He took my hand, his skin smooth and warm. Then, he slid a velvet box across the white tablecloth. Inside was a diamond so large it looked heavy. It sparkled with a light that felt almost aggressive. "Elena," he said, his voice deep and serious, "I want you to be my wife. I want to give you everything. A house in the hills, travel, security, a life where you never have to worry about money again." My heart hammered against my ribs. For a second, I forgot the insults. I forgot the shame. I saw a future where I could take care of my parents and never feel the bite of poverty again. "Yes, Julian," I whispered. "Of course." He smiled, but it wasn't the smile of a man in love. It was the smile of a man who had just closed a successful business deal. He didn't put the ring on my finger yet. He kept his hand over the box. "There is just one thing, Elena," he said. "A fresh start means a clean break. My family, my social circle, they have a certain image to maintain. Once we are married, I don't want you visiting that apartment anymore. I'll send your parents a generous monthly allowance, more than they make now, but they can't be part of our public life. No weddings, no parties, no Sunday lunches. It's for the best. We can't have them dragging us down." The music of the violins suddenly sounded like scratching. The expensive wine in my glass tasted like vinegar. I looked at the diamond, then I looked at Julian. He wasn't joking. He was offering me a golden cage, and the price of entry was my soul. I looked at Julian, and for the first time, I didn't see a protector. I saw a stranger. "You want me to buy my parents' absence?" I asked. My voice was a whisper, but it felt like it was echoing across the entire rooftop. "Don't be dramatic, Elena," Julian said, his voice smooth and practical. "I'm being realistic. You've outgrown them. Look at you. You're wearing a $3,000 dress. You speak better. You carry yourself differently. Why would you want to go back to that cramped, smelly apartment? To oil stains and grocery coupons?" Every word he spoke felt like a physical blow. He wasn't just insulting my parents, he was insulting the very foundation of who I was. He saw my background as a stain that needed to be washed away. I thought about my father's hands, rough and calloused from 40 years of honest work to keep a roof over my head. I thought about my mother's tired eyes, which always brightened when I walked through the door. They had given me everything they had, and Julian wanted me to treat them like an embarrassing secret. The heartbreak wasn't just because I was losing Julian. It was the crushing realization that the man I had loved didn't actually love me. He loved a project. He loved a girl he could mold into his own image. To him, my loyalty was a currency, and he thought he had enough money to buy it. The silence at the table became deafening. I felt small, humiliated, and deeply alone. Julian reached for the ring, ready to slide it onto my finger. "So, do we have an agreement?" I looked at the diamond one last time. It was beautiful, yes. It represented a life where I would never be hungry, never be tired, and never be poor again. But as I looked at it, I realized that if I put it on, I would be the poorest person in the world. I would have a mansion, but I wouldn't have a home. I slowly reached out and pushed the velvet box back toward him. "My father's oil stains are more honourable than your silk suits, Julian," I said, my voice finally finding its strength. Julian's face turned pale. "Elena, think about what you're doing. You'll go back to nothing. You'll be a waitress again. You'll struggle for every cent. Are you really going to throw this all away for pride?" "It's not pride," I replied, standing up. "It's love, something you clearly know nothing about." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply turned around and walked away. I heard him call my name, not with love but with frustration, as if I were a broken machine he couldn't fix. I walked through the elegant restaurant, past the people in their expensive clothes, and out into the cool night air. I didn't call a car. I walked to the nearest bus stop. I sat on the cold metal bench and waited. When the bus arrived, I paid my fare with a few crumpled coins. As I sat by the window watching the city lights blur, I felt a strange sensation. For the first time in months, I could breathe. My chest didn't feel tight anymore. I was going back to a small apartment with peeling wallpaper and a clicking heater. I was going back to the smell of toasted bread and cheap soap. I was going home. And for the first time, I knew exactly what I was worth. 5 years is a long time, but it passes quickly when you are working for a dream that belongs only to you. After that night, I didn't find a magic solution. I went back to my shift at the gallery. I worked double hours. I lived on coffee and determination. But there was a difference now. I wasn't waiting for a prince to save me. I was saving myself. I started a small catering business from my parents' kitchen. At first, it was just making sandwiches for local offices. Then, it was small parties. I used my mother's recipes, the ones Julian thought were low class. And people loved them. They loved the honesty of the food. They loved the soul in it. I saved every cent. I didn't buy silk dresses. I bought better ovens. I didn't buy diamonds. I invested in my team. Last month, I signed the papers for a new house. It isn't a mansion in the hills, but it has a garden where my father can sit in the sun. And it has a modern kitchen where my mother doesn't have to sweat over an old stove. The day we moved in, my father looked at the clean, white walls. Then he looked at his hands, still stained with the ghost of old oil. He looked at me, worried he might get the floor dirty. "Walk in, Papa," I said, taking his hand. "This house was built by those hands. You don't ever have to hide them here." Sometimes I think about Julian. I wonder if he ever found someone who was willing to erase their past for his ring. I don't feel anger toward him anymore. I feel pity. He has all the money in the world, but he is trapped in a world of shadows and appearances. He will never know the warmth of a home where you are loved for exactly who you are. My journey wasn't about choosing poverty over wealth. It was about choosing truth over a lie. It was about realizing that your roots, your family, your struggles, your scars, are not weights that drag you down. They are the soil that allows you to grow tall. True love, whether it's from a partner, a friend, or yourself, will never ask you to disappear. It will never ask you to be ashamed of the people who loved you when you had nothing. I am Elena. I am the daughter of a mechanic and a grocery clerk. And today I am a woman who is truly, deeply wealthy. As the sun sets over my new garden, I watch my parents laughing together. The clicking heater is gone, replaced by a soft, quiet warmth. I realize that the most expensive thing I ever owned wasn't that diamond ring. It was the courage to say no. If Elena's strength reminded you of your own value today, please leave a comment below. I would love to hear about a time you stood up for yourself. And if you enjoyed this story, subscribe to Study English TV for more meaningful English practice.